It has been a joy to know him, to have called him to the school, and to have had the opportunity to work with him once again these many years later in my new role as president. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our program head and the spirit of the school, Ibrahim Farajaje.
Now that's the good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ooh, I'm verklempt. This is the 4th annual symposium. This is the portal to the 5th annual symposium. And I have been requested by our communications staff to let people know that you are, usually you go to programs and they tell you don't tweet, don't take pictures, don't do this, don't do that. I've been asked to encourage you to tweet. Hashtag SKSM Symposium. Got it? Hashtag SKSM Symposium. When we first began the idea of the symposium, and I'm going to do this in some housekeeping talk, so I'll be here for a little while. The idea was that symposium would bring together all of our community, all of the pieces of our community, the people in diaspora, the students, the faculty, the staff, and grads. I'm so really my heart catches on fire when I see the grads who come back every year to participate in symposium, and that to me signifies this is really what we want. And when we had the first symposium in 2012, where Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi was honored, we decided that symposium would be the opening of the academic year. So we're in the opening of the academic year. We are in a time of beginnings, a time of return to the land of our soul, a time of return to the land of our heart, a time of return to the land of our bodies. With gratitude, we ask permission of the Miwok, the Yokut, the Pomo, the Muwekma Ohlone, to be here on their land, near their waters, under their skies, and acknowledging ancestors of origin and ancestors of choice of all of us, but especially of our beloved honored teacher, Mushim Patricia Ikeda, as well as the ancestors of Starr King School for the Ministry, the ancestors of this place where the very first courses of Starr King were held in what is now known as, appropriately, what? The Starr King Room. If you want more details, ask Arlis Ungar. She is the living history. She is one of the hearts of our community. But here we gather, in these days, we gather as a gathering of spiritual scholartivists. You know I like to make up words, so don't act shocked, okay? Spiritual scholartivists coming from many paths, and redefining each part of that, redefining spiritual, redefining scholar, redefining artist, redefining activist. That's why new words get birthed. coming from many paths. Why? For healing the earth, Panchamama, our sacred mother, for healing ourselves, for returning to wholeness, for healing ourselves and all our relations. Over the next few months, some of us in this room will celebrate beginnings of new years. Open your minds, imagination. Open your hearts, imagination. And then, Ji, who is the Holy One, will appear. Symposium comes from the Greek word symposion, which means to drink together. In ancient Greek civilization, a symposium was, talk about redefining. Symposium was a men's drinking party. So we've changed what we drink, we have diversified and mixed up who participates in a symposium. And I think if ancient Greeks were to see us today in this room, they would say like, well, that doesn't look like any symposium we know. Everybody's got their clothes on, nobody's stretched out, you know, and there's no drinking going on. But we come to drink from the wisdoms of our honored teacher, Mushim Patricia Ikeda. Mushim comes from the heartlands of the United States. Of Japanese descent, she is an internationally renowned poet, writer, MFA degree, winner of many awards. I kept finding her published every time I open a book, I see her name somewhere. She chose to continue her life as a spiritual scholartivist, continuing her life in the path of profound Buddhist practice. I would see her name in books on Buddhism. I would see her name in books about Buddhists of color. I would see her name in books about Buddhist women. I would see her name in books and articles about Buddhist women of color. I would see her name in books on engaged Buddhism, like this one that I have right here, called Not Turning Away, The Practice of Engaged Buddhism, which is a book that I found on the street in Berkeley. And when I found it on the street, I said, you know what? This is the universe speaking. I've got to meet her. I've got to meet her. I think there's something going on. And witnessing the East Bay Meditation Center and its work, I just said again, I have to meet her. Why? Because whatever it is that we have to accomplish in any day, no matter how overwhelming it might seem, no matter how exhausted we might feel, we actually can do that thing because everything that we need has been given to us to accomplish that, like me finding this book on the street. Perhaps I was here in the Bay Area to meet Mushim. Perhaps that's why all of my life was here. I thought, may Starr King honor her in the fullness of her being. She challenges us, she teases us, she invites us, she leads us to drop down into our whole selves. And she invites us to laugh while doing it. This year has been a difficult year, globally, it's been a difficult year. Ferguson, Charleston, Syria, Central African Republic, where Muslims are being massacred. There are 17,036 refugee bodies buried in the waters of the Mediterranean. To write them all out is to witness a very long scroll that was presented to the deputies of the European Union, that they might recognize that these are people, these are beings, these are lives. And these are lives that matter, as do those of people in Sri Lanka who fight over religious identity and who's a real Sri Lankan, or the tensions in Bangladesh and in Myanmar around the Rohingya Buddhist refugees who also die in the water, but also in Israel, Palestine, in Bosnia, in Oakland, in Richmond, in what I think will become over the next few years a very hot area in the United States, and that's the Central Valley of California, where resources are so severely challenged, and these are the things that give birth to uprisings. But in many of these places, in many of these conversations, in many of these spaces, I don't see many spiritual scholartivists intervening in some areas and in some ways. But do people feel that healing climate, I know we call it climate disruption, but to me this morning came climate destruction. What are we doing in the understanding of what we do in Starr King? What are we doing in this way to understand that Black Lives Matter, and this is the Starr King banner that traveled to Turkey and marched through the streets of Turkey proclaiming that Black Lives Matter, met with great support by local population. But why do we say even Black Lives Matter? Well, I think it's really simple. Because no one ever says that they matter. No one ever acts as though they actually matter. We say, oh, well, why don't we just say all lives matter? And I say, we can say all lives matter when we act like all lives matter. When we act a certain way, when police execute at will, there was a headline article in The Guardian this morning about why is it that United States police think they have turned drivers into moving targets? That doesn't reflect all lives mattering to me. When incarcerated bodies are predominantly somewhere within the brown-black spectrum, that doesn't say to me that all lives matter. When women can be attacked at will, that doesn't say to me that all lives matter. And globally, when refugees are left to drown by the thousands, that doesn't say to me that all lives matter. Even though we act as though they do, because we do not want to own the truths of our histories, of our lives, of our cultures, of our present. We need to know each other's stories. Know stories of what happened to Japanese Buddhist priests in Hawaii in World War II. Or to know the stories of Japanese in Hawaii who knew how to read and write and wrote to Japan for Japanese Hawaiians who did not know how to write, what happened? What was the destiny of leaders of community? Because this is a gathering of leaders and people honing their skill as religious leaders. There is risk involved. Maybe that's why sometimes people like to say, oh, we want to keep, the spiritual and the political separate. But as long as we live in these bodies, as long as we are on this earth, as long as we do this work, we cannot live in separation because we don't live separated lives. Even if you do not subscribe to my theories of intersectionalities, mixities, and complexities, it is indeed all interwoven. Countries and ports refused the entry of Jews in the years of the Holocaust. And people ask, how could people do that? How could countries do that? When that same thing is happening today in 2015. We see this every day. And in the midst of all of this, I dare to dream of spiritual leaders, artists, healers, cooks, creators, beings of all sorts who strive for wholeness, for transformation of our lives through liberation where all of creation matters, not in competition, not fighting for pieces of the pie or the cake or the gluten-free galette, whatever it might be, but where we come together to make new pastries. Where clean air is for all, where water is for all, where transgender people can go to the grocery store at night and walk home without fear of being killed. But in this land of the free, transgender people are killed every week. Where religious and spiritual leaders model interconnectedness of counter-oppressive work and organic multi-religiosity. That's how I met Mushim. Because we did a day of teaching together with several other spiritual leaders at East Bay Meditation Center, and I was like, oh wow, like I'm not a weirdo. Well, maybe I am, but I'm with other people here. Some of you have heard me speak of the challenge of being a United States-born brown spiritual leader who speaks like I speak, where people will say to us, oh, you're either too angry to be a good spiritual teacher because we dare to talk about issues of race and inequity and environmental racism and homophobia and transphobia. We're too angry. So I was really happy to be with such peacefully spirited, angry people. And I did, I'm going to out myself now. Mushim and I adopted each other as evil twins. So, But in this space where we can bring, as many of you here have done, in the Black Lives Matter movement, bring what you have learned in counter-oppressive, organic, multi-religious, theological education, bringing your learning that, for example, you might be in the street, or you might be in the street, or you might be in the street demonstrating, but knowing that there are people living with disabilities, different embodiments, who cannot be in the streets, but are engaged revolutionaries. Questioning. A quote from Mushim, from an article entitled Nourishing Freedom, 5 Ways to Provide an Engaged Buddhist Education for Your Children. And my favorite sentences are the following. Probably the most powerful Buddhist tool I feel I can offer children is identical to what is called critical thinking in modern education. The ability to formulate questions that can open up new areas of thought and being, and the courage to do so. What greater gift can we give? And this part is a good reminder for all of us in the educational biz, since surely we do not have all the answers. Learning to disrupt, learning to interrupt oppressive conversations, willing to be party poopers. You know, the person, when everybody feels they're in an intimate, safe space to say oppressive things about the people that they assume are not in the room. The person that raises the eco question, the educating the counter-oppressions question about that conversation. Questioning into healing. Let us release the fear. Let us release the fear. Let us embrace the possibilities of unimagined beauty. In the midst of the crowd, in the rush and crush of the day, running from thing to thing, screaming in traffic, in an act of healing the universe in stillness, in waiting for caffeine, just let us take a few seconds, a few minutes for a moment of intimacy, connected to our breathing and remembering the beloved friend in the midst of the crowd. So some days spend some quality time, one-on-one time with the beloved friend. Do some sacred earth-keeping. Tend to some recycling. Plant some seeds. Heal the earth. Find justice for the destitute and the oppressed. The one who is the source of grace and blessing has placed us exactly where we need to be, and has given us exactly the right energies to lead us towards transformation. So let us do acts of justice in our busy days. Let us clean up some litter. Let us recycle. Let us give drink to a thirsty animal. Speak a kind word to someone. Go out of our way to do something for someone else. And in that process, let us remember the words of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, which is so very, very important. Ignore those that make you fearful and sad, that degrade you back towards disease and death. Living life to the fullest in each moment, Let us bless ourselves to enjoy our lives so that we can fully embrace our deaths, which will inevitably come, with love and joy. May all who seek find. May all who love be made whole. Ashe.